there's a bit of lag on here. Need to get used to that. Okay. Right, you can ask questions and everything. I'm going to have this more of an interactive stream, so anyone can jump in and say hello. In fact, actually, yeah, just keep me company and just just talk a bit. Can you see my screen okay?
No, I don't see you like streaming at all.
Right, let me just start that up. Share screen. I'm kind of streaming over Restream and streaming in Discord. Whether that will break things or whether that will work, I don't know. Let's see. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so this is like a very beginner-friendly intro to Unity. So Rachel asked if the game is created in Unity, and yes, it is. So Unity is probably the most common game engine to create games in. Obviously, the next one is Unreal Engine, so they're both very popular. I don't know which one's winning at the moment. I think Unity still beats Unreal Engine. There's pros and cons for each. Unity's, I would say there's more Unity developers. It's one of the reasons I use Unity a lot, is because I know that if I need to grow the team, it's going to be easier to find Unity developers than Unreal Engine developers. But I have a lot of Unreal Engine developer friends, and I've also done quite a lot of jams, game jams using Unreal Engine. I've been using it off and on for many years, so I like Unreal Engine as well. Let me think about the differences, just to sort of go over that a bit. So Unity uses C# as its main development language, and I would say that C# is a better language than the Unreal Engine language, which is C++. C++ is a pretty old language by now. A lot of companies are moving away from it because Microsoft analyzed their code base a few years ago, and the amount of bugs that they get, and 70% more, I think, more than 70% of their bugs were due to memory issues caused by using C++ wrongly. So C++ is a difficult language to use correctly. I mean, if you're an expert in it, you won't hit these memory issues, but generally beginner and intermediate developers struggle with memory issues in C++. And so there's been languages that have come up since then that to address these issues. C# was one of them. You don't have to worry about memory with C#. It uses a managed memory system, so you don't even have to think about how you're allocating memory. That has pros and cons, but generally the pros outweigh the cons. And then there's low-level languages like Rust that also fix these memory issues in a very different way. Anyway, so that's one of the major differences between Unity and Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine out of the box tends to look a bit nicer, sometimes actually a lot nicer, I think. and the new tech in Unreal Engine is quite impressive. And you can actually stay out of the C++ stuff by using what they call blueprints inside Unreal Engine, which is like a graphical way of it's a graphical programming language. It's a little bit like Scratch or something like that, that you may have come across at school. They tend to teach children Scratch, and it's like you're putting blocks together and creating your logic that way. And so blueprints are very powerful. I spoke to a guy who created a complete game, and it was all blueprints except for one line of C++. So it's pretty impressive. But like I say, I'm using Unity. The reason why I'm using Unity is, there's more Unity developers, so I can grow the team. I like C#. It's a great language. It's a little bit closer to JavaScript, and I switch between JavaScript and C# a lot because I do a lot of web development as well. And it's better for 2D. I think Unreal Engine is a great 3D engine, and it was originally created out of Unreal Tournament. So it was a game engine created for Unreal Tournament and came out of that project. And so it's very 3D focused, very first person shooter focused. Not saying you can't create other games in Unreal Engine, but it's definitely focused on that side of things, and it is a little bit kind of hungry for resources, so it can be a little bit slow and cumbersome, especially developing for mobile. And so Unity definitely is better for mobile development. It's faster, sleeker, it's not as resource hungry, and so definitely I found developing in Unity is a lot quicker. So that's why I'm using Unity. But definitely some people bash on Unity, but it tends to be Unity. At the end of the day, it comes down to how good a coder you are, and there's some amazing games written in Unity, and the reason why it gets bashed on is because it's so popular, and so there's a lot of bad games written in Unity as well. It's just the way things go. Anyway, so if you're just getting out started, and you want to follow along on this course, you need to download Unity. So go along to unity.com, click on Get Started, and you can, don't let this scare you, Unity Pro, that's a lot of money, but there are free versions. So there's a personal version here, which is the one I recommend you getting, and you don't have to pay them any money until you earn 100k from your game. So that's quite a nice deal, and so I would go for that one. Clicking on that, I won't bother clicking on it, but clicking on that will download Unity Hub. And so let me open Unity Hub. So once you've downloaded and installed Unity Hub, let me bring that up. You will get something that looks like this. And this will be blank for you. It's got a load of projects that I've been working on, and in here you can install the version of Unity that you want. So click on Installs, click on Install Editor, and I would recommend going for the very latest long-term supported version of Unity, which at the moment is 2021.3.10 F1. I'm not going to bother installing that. I'm actually using 2021.3.6 F1, which is perfectly fine. If you want to follow along, pretty sure that 3.10 F1 should work absolutely fine. So you should be fine installing that one. But if you want to be super careful, install the same one that I've got, 3.6 F1. Again, that's long-term supported. So you should be absolutely fine with that. Once you've done that, go to projects and you want to click on new project. So in here you can choose which editor version that you're going to use. So if you've got lots installed like me, you can choose whichever one you want. I'm going to just choose 3.6 F1. And so this bit again can be a bit confusing for first time users. You've got 2D here, 3D here, 2D URP here, 3D HDRP here, and lots of other templates. So don't let this slow you down really, because no matter what you choose here, you can change the project later on. So this does not cause any problems later on. But just to go through roughly what these mean. So 2D means a 2D game, right? So like a platformer or a top-down, but in a 2D style. Think platformer. So you think things like Mario, stuff like that, etc., etc. So that you would choose 2D here, but this is what I would call kind of 2D legacy. So this is probably not the best one to go for if you're kind of looking to the future, right? You would want to choose 2D URP if you want to kind of be a little bit more future-proof. And they don't really make that very clear here. So this, maybe at some point they'll rename this to 2D Legacy or something like that, but that's kind of what it is. So you want to go 2D URP if you're going for a 2D game now, I would suggest. Same with 3D, right? So 3D is your 3D games, your Fortnites and Call of Duties, anything that's 3D. This is the template to choose. But again, this is a little bit legacy, and you're probably better off going with 3D HDRP if you're aiming for a PC game or a Mac game, and you would go for 3D URP if you want to sort of cover a broad range of platforms going right down to sort of mobile. So this HDRP, like it says, high definition, so it's for pretty high end games, and URP is a little bit more universal. The builds for these can run nicer on lower end devices. So for our project, we would choose 2D URP because this project is going to be a 2D WebGL mobile friendly game. So this is the one we choose here. Right, I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Any questions at all? Can you kind of, are people following along okay?
Where should
everything
people
good.
post questions?
Sorry?
Where should people post questions, in the chat here or in AMA or Morgan courses?
They can, they can do it in here in the Hangout chat. This one, for this one, I'm keeping it fairly easygoing. People can just talk and ask questions. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll stop now and again, and people can ask audio questions, I think, so I don't have to keep checking the chat. Are people posting any questions in the chat or anything? Let's have a look. Hi.
You got something from Nadim just to that you're recording this space to post the recording later so people can check. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm recording it and streaming it everywhere, so yeah, you can watch it later. Cool. Thanks, Syesgetic. Yeah, good. Glad you're following well. Cool. Okay. Right, let's dive in then. So 2D URP. Let's click on that. And click on, well, let's name it. So let's name this, what should we name it? Multiplayer blockchain game 2D. A beautiful name. And then location, let's see, I won't put it in RFG, put it in RFG but in a new folder, so we'll call this streams. Cool. And click create project. So this is probably going to be slower than it would be on your machine because I'm streaming and doing all sorts of things, so recording, so this is actually quite a bit slower than it normally is. This is because I said that Unity was so much faster than Unreal Engine, and now it's proving me wrong. So this is definitely why you need to edit streams afterwards and take out all the boring bits where Unity is going away resolving packages. But this is incredibly slow for Unity. It really does not like me running so much stuff. I won't say anything useful in these bits where it's loading because I'm just going to cut this out of the final videos, so that it would just get cut out. So if I'm just quiet in these bits, that's the reason. I don't want to say anything too useful here, otherwise I'm going to have to keep it in the video, and that's not very good really. You can just hear me slurping white wine. But on the bright side, this is a good excuse for me to upgrade my computer. I think it's getting there. Yeah, there you go. Right, wow. That took a ridiculously long piece of time. But let me just resize the windows so that you can see it. Can you see the whole window there? Hopefully you can see all of that. So this is the Unity interface. Now I can see why people would bounce off Unity, right? Because this is not particularly very user-friendly. You're kind of left on this screen and honestly do not know where to go. And I can fully understand that. I mean, I've been using Unity for a decade, and still this screen seems incredibly unfriendly, even to me. So let's just go through the basics. And I would recommend that you play around a lot in all these different panels, clicking around, just seeing what comes up when you click on things, and just get a little bit familiar with it. Now, one thing that I always do is I change my layout, because I've been using the same layout for so many years that I actually really do not like the default layout that Unity comes up with. So I'm going to switch to the layout that I like, and if you want to follow along, you probably will want to use the same layout, but you can stick to this layout if you want to, but you may momentarily find it difficult to follow along. But let me just show you what the layout I like looks like, and it's 2x3 essentially. The reason why I like this layout is that you get to see the scene view and the game view at the same time, which to my mind is pretty important. I'm getting brought food here, so that's cut this bit out of the stream that I've got a bowl of food in front of me. That's kind of nice. Right, so this is the layout that I quite like, but I do still do a little bit of tweaking to it. I feel that these icons here take up too much space. So you see this little slider at the bottom here, you can just slide that all the way to the left, and suddenly that becomes a list that looks a lot like this bit here. So for me that seems more consistent and feels quite nice. So that's one thing that I do to tweak this layout. You can try all the others. I mean, I haven't actually looked at many of these. So 4 split, that's quite interesting. I don't think that's actually very useful, but and then you got tall. Well, that's actually not too bad. It's not too bad. You can switch here, but again, you can't see the two at the same time. So I am going to stick to 2x3. Again, slide this here. And you can actually, if you make a lot of adjustments, you can actually come in here and save your layout. But seeing as I'm very close to 2x3, the only other change I make is that I like to always be able to see my console. So if you come to Window, General, Console, and click on that, you get the console panel up. And like all these panels, these can actually be manually docked, like so. So I can, if I click on this top tab here, I can drag and I can place my console underneath my inspector. And that becomes very handy later on as you're developing, because any debug commands in your code will pop up in here, and if you can't see that, you can't see it's very difficult to see what your code's doing. So this is super handy. Okay, let's have a look at some of these panels, and I will go through and explain what they're doing. So the game view is essentially how your game is going to look when it's running. So at the moment it's just a big blue very boring thing, and this is like your blank canvas that you're going to be painting your game on. So that's that. Your scene view is, and let me go through some of the controls. You can scroll in and out of your scene view with your scroll wheel. You can pan by clicking your middle mouse button, which is almost also my scroll wheel, and you can pan around like that. And you can click on things to select them, and you can select them in the scene view, but very often it's easier to select them in the hierarchy view here, and the two are very linked. So when you click on your main camera here, you're also selecting it in the scene view, and when you click on the global light, you're also selecting it in the scene view. Let's add something so you can actually see what's going on a little bit more clearer here. So if I right click and add a 2D object, and let's just add a square, and it defaults to me being able to rename this square, so I will just call this square 1. And now we have put a square sprite into our scene view, and we can see it in our game. And what we can actually do is we can click on this square 1 sprite in the scene view, click and hold, and we can move it around. So as you can see, you're almost developing a game like kind of immediately. Yeah, it's pretty incredible that you can have some immediate results with Unity within a few seconds. If you were trying to write this and put a square on the screen in any other programming language or from scratch, this would actually take you a few hours. It can be pretty tricky just to get to this one point where you're managing to draw a square on the screen. And Unity, a couple of clicks and you're there. So that's the power of the Unity game engine. Now Unity uses what they call a component system, and so this is what they call a game object, and in fact these are all game objects. And on a game object you can have multiple components, and so as you see here we have, you can see your components in the inspector. So once you've clicked on something, this inspector will change to show the components on the item that you've clicked on. So the camera is quite a complex game object. It's got a lot of different components on, whereas our square one is quite a simple game object. It's just got two components on it. It's got a transform and it's got a sprite renderer. Now the simplest game object you can create, let's just create one of these. So right click again and I can choose a empty game object. And in fact it calls it game object, just to make it clear that this is a very basic simple game object. So we'll just keep that called game object by clicking away, and if I click on it we see that this game object is pretty well the simplest game object you can have. It just has one component on it, which is called the transform. Now this transform essentially is a way of telling the game engine where in the world this game object is placed. So we see that it has a position, X, Y and Z. Now it's going to be a little bit tricky to see this one moving around. You can kind of see it, but because this game object doesn't really have anything on it, you won't be able to see it in the game window. So let's show how the transform works by clicking on square one instead. So if we click on square one, if I click above the X and drag left or right, you can see that I'm changing the X and Y position, the X position, sorry, of our square. If I click and drag over Y, I'm changing the Y position. So if you think back to school where you had a graph with an X and a Y axis, that's exactly how this is working. So this is working, this is moving this up and down on the Y axis, this is moving it along the X axis. So your question might be, well, what's the Z for? And for 2D games, luckily you can kind of mostly forget about the Z. And in fact, you should think that all your items should have a Z of 0, because the Z is really only used in 3D games to affect the depth of the object. Yeah, so in 3D obviously you need 3 axes, and so Z is the third axis. But 2D games are a little bit simpler. They only really care about the X and the Y axis. So in general, you should try and keep, in a 2D game, you should try and keep everything with a Z of 0, and that will simplify things and you can kind of just forget about the Z. Right, let's create another game object. So if I right click here, choose 2D object, and this time I will create a circle. And let's just move it away from our square. And see, now we have a square and a circle. Now because they're both white, it's a little bit tricky to tell them apart, so let's color them. And the way we can do this is we can click on color here, and we can just drag this up to the top right corner here, and we've got ourselves a red circle. And then we can click on our square and we can click on that, and we can click round here, and let's choose a blue color, but maybe, or maybe actually let's make it green so that it stands out better on the background. So we now have a square, which let's rename this to square green. So I just hit F2 there to rename that. On a Mac, I think you just hit enter and you can rename it. and circle, and I will name that red. And let's just delete this game object. So you can delete things in here just by clicking on them and hitting the delete key, like so. So you might be asking, if we don't have a, if we're not using Z, and how can we tell what will be behind what? So that's a good question. So let's grab our green, and at the moment our green seems to be showing in front of our red. But if we drag this down here, now that doesn't seem to make a difference, right? So you would think that maybe it would do the red first, then the green. But the only real way to get things to be in front of each other or behind each other consistently is to use this order in layer. So if I want to put the green behind the red, I just lower the order in layer, and if I want to have it on top, I increase the order in layer. And I can do the same with the circle. So if I want the circle to be on top, I can increase it, and below decrease it. And so that's pretty important in 2D games. If you have characters running around on a scene, you of course don't want them to be hiding behind, say if they're walking on grass, you want the grass to be below the characters and the characters to always show on top of the grass. So this is one way that you can make sure that that happens. As you can see, this component is called the sprite renderer, and it's telling me here that it's rendering a square, and this is the color that it's going to render that square in. And I can actually, although I right clicked and I did 2D and created it this way, I can actually change it. So I can come in here and I can search for circle, and looks like I've got a variety of circles here, but I can choose one of these, and now we have two circles, and the square green is now erroneously named square green because it's got a circle in. Let's change it back to a square. Double click, and that has changed it back to a square. Now you can see there's an asterisk here next to sample scene, and this means that I've changed something in the scene but I haven't saved. So I can do file and save like so, or I can do just Control S, and that will save a scene. I would recommend saving your scenes often, because Unity does have a tendency to crash, especially as you start to add more and more to it. So saving your scenes often is definitely something you should get into the habit of doing. Right, so now we've said we're making a 2D game here, but as you can see, we still kind of have remnants of a 3D system in here, and this is because Unity really is a 3D engine, and its sort of 2D abilities came later. So it's pretty simple to switch into 3D mode. You can just kind of click here, and wow, suddenly everything is 3D, right? And so You know, I'm showing you things like this because you might suddenly click a wrong button and you're in this mode, and that's kind of scary. It's not at all. It's just that Unity is just as happy doing 3D as it is 2D, more so if anything. And if we click on 2D again, then suddenly it's pretending to be just a 2D engine. So, and of course, I can add 3D objects. So what I could do is I could right click in here and I could add a 3D object, and I could add a cube. And although my camera is very much a 2D oriented camera at the moment, in the scene view, and this is why it's nice to see both the scene view and the game view, because the scene view gives you a kind of better idea of what's going on in your scene in a way. Now you can see that we have a cube in here. Let's color our cube because we can, but as you can probably tell, it's going to be a little bit trickier for us to color our cube. We don't seem to have a color changer on here like we had. You know, we've got a mesh renderer here, but if we go to our square, we've got a sprite renderer. Our sprite renderer is nice and friendly, makes it easy for us to change our color, but our cube has a mesh renderer on and no colors here. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tangent because, you know, this course is going to be mostly on 2D games, but, you know, just so that the idea is really to get a little bit comfortable with Unity and you know, be confident about clicking around and doing stuff. So you shouldn't be scared about messing around, and some of these basics will get you a long way. So one of the basics in when you're in 3D, when you're in a 3D realm of Unity, is something called materials. 3D objects have materials on them, and so to color them, you really want a material that you're putting the color on. So let's do that. Now, as you can see, this is our project folder. I haven't really gone through this very much, right? So this hierarchy, and you can move these things around here like that. So this is, you know, move things around, be confident about being able to grab stuff like this so you can see things clearly. The Unity editor is very nice and adjustable, so get used to grabbing these lines and moving things around as you like, and then of course, like I say, save your layout if you want to. Okay, so let's just talk about the hierarchy view. In the hierarchy view is basically like showing you what's in your scene, but the project view is different. The project view is kind of showing you everything in your project, and this is more like a folder. This is actually a folder on your disk. You can actually right click this and click show in Explorer, and I'll do this actually so that you can see what's going on, and you can see that this is actually just a reflection of what's going on your hard drive. So if I go into assets, we should see a scenes folder and a settings folder. So let's double click assets, and there you go, we've got a scenes folder and a settings folder. So this is the fundamental difference between the project window here, project, and the hierarchy. This is inside the sample scene. This is not really on disk. Sample scene exists on the disk. It's actually in scenes, but all these other objects kind of exist inside this scene, and is not easily visible on in your folder system. So that's a pretty fundamental difference here. And one thing that you should always do is you should keep your project nicely organized. So you really do want to create a nice folder system underneath your assets folder to keep stuff organized. So I would recommend doing create folder. So right click on assets, do create folder, and create a folder for your game. And you can simply call it game. So I will call this game like so. And what this means is that you know that everything inside this folder is stuff that you've added. As you saw, that Unity kind of added this scene for us. We didn't really have any control over this, and it added this settings, and we didn't really have any control over that. So it's quite nice to have a folder where you know that everything inside there is yours and that you created it, and it keeps things nice and organized. So I was talking about materials, so let's create a folder for materials. So create folder. I'm going to create a folder called materials, like so. And we can actually see this materials folder here, but we can actually click on this and we can see it there as well. This is kind of how this works. So if I click in here, this is just showing the contents of our materials folder. So let's create a material inside here. So if I right click in here, I can go to create and come down here and I can choose create material. And I'm going to call this matte yellow, like so. And if I want to have control over what this material is, I need to choose the shader for it. So don't worry too much about this, but I'm going to come down here and I'll choose under Universal Render Pipeline. I'm going to choose Unlit, and I'm going to color this yellow. And then I'm going to drag this material onto my cube, and that has changed the color of my cube to yellow.
Morgan,
Yeah.
there's some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me answer these questions. Okay, right, let's have a look. What's the food, Morgan? Okay. Oh, yes, the console. Most important tool for a developer. Mine's a Nintendo 64. I use the Nintendo Switch. These are very, very good comments. My favorite console. You know, it's the Steam Deck. Has anyone got a Steam Deck?
Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch for the win.
You like the Nintendo Switch, Anna. But you haven't got a Nintendo Switch. I know you haven't got one. You had one for a while.
Yeah, well, I got bored of it.
Well, then it can't be your favorite console, surely.
My mobile phone is my favorite console right now.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why the Steam Deck is my favorite console is it can do all the consoles. So that's why it's my favorite, because I actually have a Nintendo Switch emulator on it, so I can play Breath of the Wild. I've actually got Animal Crossing on there, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, its emulation capabilities are pretty amazing. I've only really scratched the surface, so yeah, that's why the Steam Deck and the controllers on the Steam Deck are just lovely, just really nice.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too technical, you know. There's just too many things. So, and it's on the Steam Deck, and then there's you know, you can't really see things on the screen.
Kitsune Kitsune is asking about the food. It is noodles, and I'm just going to start eating some actually because I'm starving. So this is a good time for a little bit of a food break. Oh, it's got some nice shiitake mushrooms in.
So Unity doesn't do Y sort. I don't understand that question.
Yeah, yeah, it can do. Well, not kind of. Yes, it can do. I know exactly what they mean. In fact, I'm using Y sort in RFG, and I can go through that. It's a little bit tricky to set up, and I have to look up every time to try and figure out how to. It's a little bit tricky to set up, but it does actually do it. And it does do it quite well.
I don't think you can show them some PvP just yet. I think that's a streaming session, 20 before you get there, right?
Ed, you looked up the Steam Deck. Yeah, it's so good. It's a bit of a wait for it, but I ordered it the day that it was. Oh, thanks, Ed. Yeah, I ordered it the day that it went on the Steam store. Still took months to arrive. I hope you don't mind me stopping to eat for a second, guys. Yeah, just ask me any questions. You can do it audio as well. I'm quite happy for people to talk, no problem. But yeah, we'll start back up again in a few minutes. This is Jetic. Okay, well, yeah, let us know. Let us know what you're working on. Always good to share. Well, nice. Yeah, full stack. Pretty tricky nowadays. A lot to learn. I do actually have some full stack courses, or full stack-ish. And yeah, if you're doing a lot of JavaScript, I do have some. Yeah. Well, good luck. Good luck. But yeah, I do have some JavaScript courses as well. So give us a shout because well, Anna will know whether you're a holder or not. I don't know, but I'm happy to anyone who's interested. I can drop a course or two to them, no problem at all. Yeah, I do have a YouTube. I will if you check out my courses channel, which is in Discord, I'll repost some of my links in there. So yeah, any questions? Just give us a shout. I just thought that building games was a good way of learning JavaScript, so I did a few games in JavaScript, and they were a lot of fun. Cool. Well, it's all recorded, so you'll be able to check it out later, no problem. Yeah, Anna's a star. Thanks for saying. Thanks to her. She's doing lots of cool organisation. Cool. How are we doing for time? I think actually, I may just call it quits at that. Yeah. Let me just round things off a little bit, and then I think we'll call it quits. Okay. So, yeah, so I think it's interesting that you can switch between 2D and 3D so easily in Unity. And there's actually quite a few games that use this to good effect. So there's games like Don't Starve that are kind of like a weird combination of 2D and 3D. It's kind of called 2.5D, and so it can be Unity can be very powerful for creating games like that. And as you can see, like because we've got a camera set up in a certain way, this 3D cube looks, and if I move it on the X, I mean it looks like a sprite. Yeah, you can't really tell. So how would you kind of flip this into a 3D game then? Well, let's do that. Yeah, let's have a little bit of a play. So let's go to our main camera, and all we really need to do is switch our projection. So we have this camera component on here, and if you ever sort of see it like that, right, you know, you can always just expand these components with this little widget here, and we can switch from orthographic to perspective. Now you can probably see kind of that something's happening here, but things get interesting if we rotate on, say, the x-axis. Yeah, you can see that we're looking up and down here. So let's look down and then move this up, and there you go. You can see that that is a cube. Now we haven't got any shading in here, so, and that's because I chose this unlit shader here, but I might have to do two things here, but let's do this out of interest. So if we go to Universal Render Pipeline and instead choose lit, right, which didn't do anything, but let's kill our global light, 2D light, and let's add a normal light in here. Now this might actually not work, but let's see if it does. I don't think it's going to. That's a shame. That's probably because of the renderer we're using, so it's not going to be supporting. But in let's see. Yeah, that's definitely should be working, but it's probably, yeah, it's probably some rendering settings we've got set. So unfortunately we can't see any sort of shading on here the way we've got this renderer set up at the moment. But if we were using a more 3D friendly renderer instead of the 2D renderer we're using, you would start to see some shading going on here. So that's kind of how easy it is to switch between 2D and 3D. And this kind of shows how obviously the Unity engine was a kind of 3D first engine. So let's switch things back. So if I zero out this rotation, and if I bring this down to 0, and let's delete our cube. And the only other thing I kind of want to point out here, and let's change this back to orthographic. The only other thing I want to point out here is that for the camera really, the Z does matter for the camera. If you think about it, right, the camera is pointing, it's quite hard to see, but it's pointing in this Z direction, so it's pointing this way. And what I'm doing here is I'm holding down the right mouse button, and that kind of rotates like this, and then I'm holding down the middle button to pan like this, and this is sort of a reasonably easy way to move around here. There's actually a better way. You can actually you can hold down the right mouse button and use the AWSD keys and move around like a first person shooter, which is pretty cool, yeah? So that's a nice way of moving around as well in the scene view. But what I kind of wanted to point out was this camera here is pointing in this direction, and if I move it to be in front of these objects, you can see that they disappear. And that kind of makes sense, right? That you want the camera to be sort of in front of what it's taking a picture of, videoing, you know, that kind of makes sense. So that's the only really in 2D land when you have to worry about the Z is for the camera really. And I will often just put -1 here, because it only needs to be just in front of the 0, and so that's usually fine. But I think we'll pull it back to say -10, which tends to be fairly standard how Unity defaults to the main camera being at -10. And that just keeps it a little bit out of the way, so that's quite nice. And like I say, we're doing a 2D game, so we will be in this 2D mode, which, as you see, kind of just shifts so that we are on the sort of XY plane, so to speak, and looking directly at our objects like that. And I think at that I will leave it there. Oh, one thing I will do just before we go is I will create another scene so that we're ready to go for beginning of the next session. So inside game, I will just create a folder called scenes, and this will hold all our scenes. And we will, inside scenes, right click in here and choose create scene. And I'm just going to call this main scene. And I'm going to double click on it. And I'm going to, I don't really care about sample scene. I'm going to say save, but I don't really care. And now we have a blank scene ready to start from our next session. And all we've got in here is our main camera set to orthographic mode and nothing else, which is perfect. So at that, I will finish this session. I hope you all managed to follow along. If you needed to go away and install Unity, that's good. If you can make sure that you got everything installed and you've perhaps had a look at this stream to just get a little bit of familiarity. Next session we will start bringing in some assets. So we will bring in some cool art that Simone has created, and we will start moving stuff around the screen. So that's going to be super exciting. We'll do our first scripts and we'll move stuff around, and that's when you're really going to start feeling like you're creating a game. So that's going to be really cool. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Morgan.
Cool, good. Well, I hope people enjoyed that, and yeah, hopefully see you on the next one. Same time tomorrow.
Nice. See you, boss. Catch you later.
Yeah, bye.
See ya.